We do have some time for Q&A.
Yeah, Karen and Ron asked, how did the Goulburn community raise the huge amount of money? So that refers to the Goulburn Community Solar and Battery Project, $1.9 million. Firstly, they've been working on the project for 4 to 5 years. We actually approached them. We kind of had them on a list of potential projects for Como Energy, but they were on their own path. But then they announced publicly that they were pausing the project due to federal government policy uncertainty. And it was around the time where Malcolm Turnbull was rolled over as PM at the time. So they paused the project. So Gerald and I reached out and said, hey guys, can we have a look at the project and see if there's something we think we can help you with? Then the grant came about and so on. So they went into fundraising mode around August, September last year, with an event that had around 450 people there in person, then a webinar, then another in-person event. They raised $500,000 on the first night, and money came in quickly after that as well. So one of the comments we heard in that first investor night was someone asked one of the attendees, oh, how did you hear about this project and this investment night? And the person responded, you'd have to be blind and deaf not to have heard about this project in Goulburn. So it was really a long-standing effort, and Ed Suttle being very good with the local press on the radio shows, local newsletter, newspaper, in the press every couple of months. So a long and very determined effort by the group of volunteers there.
Our friends at the Community Power Agency, they call this positive parochialism. It's a term that I just heard yesterday, and I really liked it. But it really speaks to the power of being local. And Como Energy can only be an enabler in all of these projects in terms of providing subject matter expertise that we build over working on many, many projects. But what these projects really need is a local community that is deeply engaged. Ultimately, there is, I think, no limit of investment funds for community energy projects. I'm German by background, and Helen was speaking to the fact how heavily renewables are invested into by local communities in Germany, and that really resonates with me. There is no limit in investment funds in regional communities, but you need to engage. You need to have people on site. They need to hear about it. They need to understand it. They will want to have that ability to go out to the solar farm or battery project and claim it as theirs. That is really, really important. And it's probably the most powerful engagement tool that you can possibly have.
Can I just jump in there too and thank Jonathan and Gerald for the presentation they just gave us. I really, really enjoyed that. And I think you're so right. Seeing is believing in this space. And many people, of course, are confused by the complexity of energy and energy transmission. So to actually go out and see and touch and understand how it works is really exciting for local communities. So I think you're so right. The community engagement element of this is really important. But likewise, money speaks, and folks get pretty excited when they can see the savings that this brings. And one of the factors I've found really enabling is around that social license aspect too, when you can demonstrate to a local community that their local hospital or their local school or their local childcare centre can save so much money through a community energy project, and spend that money then on educating kids or providing better healthcare or providing greater income security for low-income people in social housing. Community members really engage with that too.
Fantastic. There was a question from Kenny. Can the microgrid use the existing distribution network to the customers, including residential? I think this is, I'll go first, and happy for Helen or Gerald to respond as well on all of these. In Essential Energy in regional New South Wales, they're sort of working their way through this space, including on our CoRE project. and that they have made a decision that they won't sell their portions of the grid to potential microgrids. So for the CoRE project, we have from the start considered it as a new network. So part of the project includes investing in poles and wires. I don't think there's any policy determined for other regions. So it's an emerging space and to be decided. But it speaks to the value of seed projects, starting with those first 3 to 5 customers, testing it and growing from there. Did you have anything further on that, Gerald, or should we go to the next question?
From us, that next question.
Elaine asks, in Victoria, costs for moving energy into a community space and then out to an individual customer are being discussed. What will be the costs of moving energy between customers and the gateway? At a guess, I think that might be talking about community scale batteries, where the battery is providing such a valuable service of supplying into the grid and meeting peak demand at those key times, but it does have to charge the battery at other times, at off-peak times, and often during the day to soak up some of that solar as the solar sponge. And those community batteries do pay a network fee to charge, even though it's providing that grid service. And it's generally something that is trying to be addressed for community scale batteries. They don't have to pay to use energy when they're providing a grid service. But within the gateway, it's generally the cost of owning and operating the local network. And that's covered by that sort of margin of buying at the gate meter and selling on to customers to enable the finance of an operation of the microgrid. Gerald or Helen, did you have anything to add on that one?
Well, sorry, Helen, you go.
I think you've answered it very well. I just would add to that one of the advantages, or one of the gaps that I identified through my work with communities was this lack of investment currently into local community skills and training. And you touched on it in your presentation earlier, Jonathan and Gerald, that local companies and skilled tradespeople stand to benefit too from the maintenance of the microgrid lines. So again, another opportunity, I think, for federal government to invest in the skills and training through local TAFEs and businesses to really profit from a new component of their perhaps electrical business or maintenance business in a way that's outside of the current system.
Yeah, that actually also speaks to the fact that a microgrid is actually also a distribution grid, and in our CoRE example, we're looking to effectively harness that value differential that Jonathan was talking about in order to fund the microgrid. You could actually slice it more thoroughly, where you say there's generation, there's distribution in the microgrid and retailing, and rather than having participating in that retail differential to fund the microgrid, you could have a microgrid business just charge for network usage, like Essential Energy or Osgrid or anyone else of that nature would do. So that's another revenue model, but then it is effectively the cost of operating just the microgrid. And if we have a future where we have resilient microgrids and relatively little other network infrastructure between these hubs, then hopefully that will ultimately become a more financially attractive proposition.
All right, there's a question from David, and it's similar to ones that have been addressed, but it'd be good to get to it. In these projects, including the Healesville proposal, who would own the poles and wires and who would be responsible for their maintenance, including in-storm impacts like we have recently experienced? Would the poles and wires be gifted to the local business model or purchased and part of the overall cost? So maybe I'll go first. And in terms of ownership, we looked at a few options with CoRE. One would be that the customers could own it or part of it. Another could be that the request for proposal is not just from a construction company, but from an owner-operator. And then the third would be just a general investment into this new company. And the way we're heading, it's likely to be a combination of the customers and the local community owning it. So one of the main considerations is scale. So it's likely to be about a $1.5 million microgrid. So needing to earn around $200,000 a year to remain viable and cover the cost of administration, O&M, and return on investment. So scale and operations and maintenance is a key consideration for that. On the CoRE project and the Healesville proposal, I think it would start with seed projects where you're building an entirely new network or small microgrid. So you don't run into that barrier of having to negotiate gifting or purchase of local poles and wires. But certainly as the sort of seed projects pop up and then grow, that could be a conversation to have with the local DNSP saying, hey, we want to do this next 100 customers. We could build our own, or we could make you an offer to buy your network and reuse it for the purposes of the microgrid. So it's something that emerges over the life journey of the microgrid development.
Yeah. And specifically for the Healesville proposal, what actually went into that grant funding will be a community finance solution for that microgrid in the form. So what we propose as the tool, which is now available and could be utilized really well for this scale of project, is crowd equity. So a similar tool to cooperative fundraising, but with a probably slightly better known corporate vehicle, namely just a normal company. So we propose it would be a crowd equity raise to fund that microgrid.
So that's the questions. Michelle's put a link to a form in the chat. Jeff, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, if you have a look in the chat section at the bottom of your screen, there's a link there to a feedback form. So if you'd like to click on that at the end of the webinar, you'll be able to answer those questions. It's really helpful to us if you can do that, because we're dependent on Yarra Valley Rangers grant funding to run our events, and they like to see that the ratepayers' money is being used effectively. So being able to feed back to council in our acquittal that the number of people and what people thought about the event is really quite helpful for us. So if you could do that, we'd really appreciate that. It looks like we've come to the end now. Gerald and Jonathan, you're at the end of your presentation and Q&A. Nothing more you want to say?
So Kenny has asked, are existing generators looking to add solar farms, or are they too invested in existing generation models? If coal and gas is declining, then the existing generators must fill the gaps somehow. I think certainly AGL and Origin have signed, and Energy Australia have signed a lot of power purchase agreements with new wind and solar farms, and they're mostly generating now. They find that these infrastructure funds that own the wind and solar farms can finance them cheaper than AGL and Origin. And also there's an interesting one. There's infamously, Vales Point Power Station was bought by Trevor St. Baker from the New South Wales government for $1 million and is now valued at $770 million. But a couple of years ago, they signed a power purchase agreement with a 330 megawatt solar farm in Darlington Point. And I asked the CEO about that, and I said, was it to protect yourselves on those hot summer days where there's a risk that your power station might trip or fail? And he said yes, and also protects them from the risk of increased coal prices. So I thought that was a great example of a coal power station using large-scale solar to protect their business and manage their risk. And also in Queensland, a Japanese company called Sojitz, which owns a coal mine in Queensland, is committed to a 100 megawatt solar farm in Queensland. And my reaction to that is if we're getting solar power in coal mines, then I think solar and renewables are definitely winning in the race. So hopefully that answers Kenny's question.
Good. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Well, thank you very much to our speakers, Jonathan and Gerald. It was a very, very informative presentation, and it's great to have all of that information that you provided. Fantastic that we've got this opportunity to bring all of the work that we were doing nutting away on the phones and webinars and the computers and so on, to bring that all out to the larger community, and now to have it on video that we can make it available on our website as well for people to see. It's a great vision that you've got, and I've loved working with you with the creativity and the inspiration that you brought to this particular project. And Helen, thank you so much for giving up your very busy time to come to our webinar today. It's great for people to hear about the project that the local power plan that you're pushing in Parliament, and it's inspirational to volunteers on the ground, like in Healesville CoRE, to feel that we have at least one politician in the federal government who's pushing the barrow for us and looking to get the power that we need and the funding that we need to do the work on the ground. So thank you very much for that. And Councillor Fiona McAllister had to leave early because she had to go up into the Dandenongs to be there with the community that's still suffering from the storm outage. But I would like to thank Councillor Fiona McAllister as well for her opening address and for introducing Dr. Helen Haines today. Before going, I would like to thank the Yarra Ranges Council for the funding we received to run our events, including this particular webinar. I'd also like to thank our Central Committee, volunteers, and the others in our organisation who work so hard to ensure that we can reach out to the community and do the work that we are doing, including this work with Gerald and Jonathan. And I'd remind you of our next event on the 14th of August, which is on electric vehicles. So that's the first time that in the 4 years we've been running, we've addressed that particular topic. And it looks like being very exciting with the speaker has just recently been allocated for that event, and it looks like we're going to have at least one company bringing an electric car along to demonstrate to the public what the vehicle looks like and feels like, and we hope people will be able to have a drive in it as well. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I'd like to thank our the members of the community who joined us today for coming along and listening. And once again, thank you very much to our speakers. I'll bid you farewell now. But before I go, a final thank you to Tom Bazzalia, who's handled all the technical stuff for us today. Thank you, Tom. You're a gem, and we've appreciated your work very much. Goodbye for now.